I took my baby and ran, until the mafia boss called, "You and the child are mine." My name is Kate Thompson, and that is the first lie. I live in a town that clings to the side of a Colorado mountain, a place where the air is so thin and sharp it scrapes your lungs clean. It is a good place to be a ghost. I work 2 jobs, from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. I am Kate, the waitress at the Mountaintop Diner, slinging coffee and hash for tourists and locals who smell like pine sap, from 4 until 9 at night. I am the invisible woman who cleans the empty, soulless vacation cabins scattered up the canyon. Between those 2 jobs, I am just mom. I have a son, Leo. He's 3 years old, and he is the only true thing I have left. He's a quiet boy, watchful. He has my pale skin, but nothing else of me. The rest of him, the parts that make my heart seize when he turns his head just so, is all his father. He has the same thick, dark hair that waves slightly at the temples, the same heavy-lidded eyes, the color of soot. Sometimes he looks at me with an unnerving, adult stillness, his small hand wrapped around the worn-out plush lion I bought him at a thrift store. In those moments, Chicago is not 1,000 miles away. It is right here in my cramped, 1-bedroom apartment, breathing down my neck. I am haunted by the smell of burnt garlic and expensive Merlot. I am haunted by Santino's. It was his restaurant, of course, Dominic Morello. Everything in that neighborhood was his. I was 19, new to the city, and desperate. Santino's needed a waitress. I needed the rent. I did not understand, not at first, why the other girls kept their distance, why the managers never wrote me up when I broke a glass. I did not understand why he always sat at table 4, the one in the back corner. Even when the restaurant was empty, he never ate, just drank espresso, his dark suit immaculate, his presence sucking all the air out of the room. He was not handsome in the way of movie stars. His features were too harsh, his nose slightly crooked, as if it had been broken and set badly. But his eyes, they saw everything. They saw me. One night, my shift ended. I walked out the back door into the alley, and a black car was waiting. Not a cab, a sedan, sleek and silent as a shark. The driver got out and opened the rear door. "Mr. Morello is waiting for you. Natalie," he said. My name was Natalie Voss then. That is the second lie. It was not a request. It was an arrangement. That is what they call it. An arrangement. It sounds so clean, so transactional. But it was not. He did not keep me in a rough apartment above a bar. He kept me in a place of glass and steel on the 32nd floor, overlooking the lake, a place with floors so white they hurt your eyes and a bathtub deep enough to float in. I had a closet full of clothes I had not chosen and a refrigerator stocked with food I never bought. I was his. I tried to tell myself I was a victim, that I was coerced, and I was. The power imbalance was a canyon between us. He was Dominic Morello, a name whispered with fear, a man who moved pieces of the city around like a chessboard. I was a waitress. But the truth, the ugly, complicated truth that I scrub away in empty showers, is that I fell for him. He was not cruel. He never raised his voice. He never laid a hand on me in anger. His control was quieter, deeper. It was in the way he would watch me read, his gaze so heavy I could feel it on my skin. It was in the way he's cupped my jaw in his hand, his thumb brushing my cheek, his eyes searching mine for something I did not even know I had. He would come in late, smelling of the cold night air and something metallic, like old pennies. He would not speak, just shed his jacket and tie and pull me to him. He held me like a man starving, and I, stupid and young and desperately lonely, held him back. I mistook possession for passion. I mistook his silence for depth. I found the stillness in the eye of the storm and called it safety. Then I got pregnant. The terror was immediate. It was cold and absolute. A child was not part of the arrangement. A child was a chain. A child was a witness. I did not know what he would do. Would he see it as a weakness? A betrayal? An error? I did not wait to find out. I told him I was sick, a female problem, and he was busy anyway. There was some trouble with the Irish. I think he was distracted. I wore loose sweaters. I hid the sickness in the mornings. I found a friend, Sarah, a nursing student who owed me money and who hated the world I was in even more than I did. She was the only one I told. She helped me disappear. She got me a room in a boarding house way out in the suburbs. She brought me prenatal vitamins. She was there when Leo was born, on a rainy Tuesday, in a room that smelled like bleach and rust. She held my hand while I screamed into a pillow, my body tearing itself apart to bring his son into the world. 2 days later, with the last of the cash I had stolen from the safe in his glass and steel prison, I was on a bus heading west. I did not leave a note. I just vanished. For 3 years, it worked. The silence was my sanctuary. I became Kate Thompson. I paid in cash. I kept my head down. I taught Leo to be quiet. Until today. The mail came at noon. During my 2-hour break, it was a thin envelope, official, with the transparent window, Social Security Administration. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tore it open. It was not a check. It was a notice, a discrepancy. The Social Security number I was using, the one I bought from a man in a Denver bus station, belonged to a woman who had died in 1993. The system had finally flagged it. My alias was compromised. I was no longer a ghost. I was a target. I went back to the diner, my hands shaking so badly I spilled a cup of coffee on a customer. "Sorry," I mumbled, wiping it up. "Just tired." I kept looking at the door. Every man who walked in was one of his. Every laugh was a threat. And then, at 1:30, I saw it. It was parked across the street, partially hidden by a snowbank, a black sedan. Not a Subaru or a Ford truck like everyone else drove. This was sleek, expensive, and out of place. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like polished obsidian. It did not move. It just sat there, watching the diner. I knew he knew. I do not remember finishing my shift. I do not remember the walk back to my apartment, carrying Leo on my hip from the sitter's house. That night, I panicked. I pulled out the canvas duffel bag I'd kept packed under my bed for 3 years. It held $3,000 in small bills, a box of diapers, 2 changes of clothes for Leo, his lion, and my fake driver's license. I was stuffing granola bars into the side pocket when my phone rang. It was not my real phone, the cheap smartphone I used for the diner. It was the burner, the prepaid brick I kept in a box of stale oatmeal in the back of my pantry. I had not turned it on in 6 months, but I charged it every Sunday, just in case. The screen lit up, blocked ID. My blood did not just run cold, it turned to ice. It stopped moving. My lungs seized. I knew, with the certainty of a believer seeing God, who it was. I flipped it open. I did not say anything. I heard breathing on the other end, slow, even, and deliberate, the sound of a man who has never had to hurry in his life, the sound of Dominic Morello. A full minute of silence passed. He was letting me wait. He was reminding me who held the power. Then, his voice. It was exactly as I remembered, low, calm, like gravel wrapped in velvet. It was not a question. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact. "You and the child are mine." The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the linoleum. The line was still open. I could hear his distant, silent breathing from the floor. I could not move. I could not breathe. I was 19 again, standing in the alley, the black car door open. "Mama?" I turned. Leo was standing in the doorway of his small bedroom, his blanket dragging on the floor. He was clutching his toy lion to his chest, his dark, serious eyes fixed on my face. He did not know why I was crying, but he knew I was terrified. And that broke me more than the phone call. I did not sleep that night. I sat on the floor, my back pressed against the apartment's flimsy front door, my arms wrapped around Leo as he slept in my lap. The bag was at my feet, but I knew it was useless. You cannot run from a man who can find a ghost. The memories came thick and fast, suffocating me. I remembered the danger, the night a man, one of his rivals, put his hand on my arm at a party. He leaned in, his breath hot with whiskey, and told me I was too pretty for Dominic. I froze. Dominic did not look up from his drink. He just continued his conversation. But later, as we were leaving, he put his hand on the man's shoulder, a simple, friendly gesture. He smiled. The man's face went white. We left. I never saw that man again. But then, another memory, the one I keep buried the deepest. I was 6 months pregnant. I was clumsy, sick, and terrified, still hiding it under heavy sweaters. I was lying on the sofa in the glass apartment, convinced he was across town. The door opened. He walked in, his overcoat damp with snow. I sat up, my heart choking me. He stopped, just looking at me. His eyes traced the new, slight curve of my stomach, hidden but not hidden enough. I waited for the explosion, the cold dismissal. He unbuttoned his coat. He did not say a word. He walked over, sat on the edge of the coffee table, and just looked at me. Then, slowly, he reached out. His hand was so large, so warm. He laid it flat against my belly, right where Leo was nestled. I held my breath. Leo kicked, a small, fluttering tap against his palm. Dominic's expression did not change, but his thumb moved, just once, brushing over the spot. He met my eyes, and for one terrifying, breathtaking second, I saw something in them. Not possession, not anger, something I could not name, something that looked almost like softness. He never mentioned it, and I ran before I could find out what it meant. The next morning, I was a zombie. I dressed Leo, my movements jerky and automatic. I had to go. I had to try. A sharp knock echoed through the apartment. It was not a suit. It was my landlord, Mr. Henderson, a man in his 60s with kind, watery eyes. He was twisting his flannel hat in his hands. "Morning, Kate," he said, his voice strained. "Listen, I had a strange visitor last night, after you got home." My stomach clenched. "A visitor?" "Yeah, a man. Drove a real fancy car. He offered me $10,000. Kate, cash." He laughed, but it sounded like a cough. $10,000, just to tell him which apartment was yours, just for your address. I gripped the doorframe. What did you tell him?" "I told him to get lost," Henderson said, indignant. "I don't run that kind of place. Didn't feel right, but he just smiled. Kate," he said, "it doesn't matter." And he left this. He held out a crisp, white business card. There was no name, just a phone number embossed with a Chicago area code. I packed the bag. I grabbed Leo. I did not bother locking the door. I ran down the back stairs, my boots slipping on the icy metal. I half-dragged, half-carried Leo toward the bus terminal. The only way out of this town? The terminal was mostly empty. It smelled of diesel fumes and stale cigarettes. I went to the counter, my eyes scanning the room. "One ticket," I said, my voice hoarse. "One adult, one child to Salt Lake City, the next bus." "That'll be $48, the woman said, not looking up. As I fumbled for the cash, 2 shadows fell over me. "Ma'am?" I spun around. 2 men. They were not from here. They wore dark, tailored wool coats and polished shoes that clicked on the dirty floor. They were clean-shaven, solid, and their eyes were flat. Chicago. "No," I whispered. Leo whimpered and buried his face in my coat. I did not think. I reacted. I shoved Leo behind me and I screamed. I kicked the closest one, hard in the shin. "Get away from me! Get away from my son!" I was a cornered animal. I clawed at the other man's face. People in the terminal were staring. The man I kicked did not even flinch. He just took the hit. The other one grabbed my wrists, his grip like iron but controlled. "Natalie," he said, his voice low and calm, not even strained, "we are not here to hurt you." He slowly let go of my wrists, holding his hands up, palms out. "Mr. Morello was very clear," the first man said, rubbing his shin, his voice almost gentle. He said, "Don't scare the boy." 1,000 miles away, in a city of steel and shadows. Dominic Morello stood at a floor-to-ceiling window. The Chicago rain hammered against the glass, blurring the skyline into a watercolor of gray and neon. He was not looking at the city. He was looking at a photograph in his hand. It was grainy, a still from a security camera, time-stamped 2 days prior. It showed a woman in a cheap parka, her face thin and tired, hurrying a small boy in a red hat out of a diner. The woman was Natalie. The boy was his. Sal, his right-hand man, stood silently by the door. Dominic traced the outline of the small boy's face on the photo with his thumb. His expression was unreadable. "They have them," Sal said quietly. Dominic did not turn. He stared at the picture for another long moment, at the child who had his eyes. "Bring them home," and he said, his voice soft, but with the unyielding weight of granite. "I won't lose them again." The journey was a blur of detached horror. We did not go to the main airport. The 2 men, the one I had kicked and the one who had grabbed me, escorted us back to the black sedan. They were polite. It was the politeness of morticians. "Please, watch your head," the one who had grabbed me said, holding the door. His name, I learned, was Anthony. The other, the quieter, broader one, was Sal. Leo, sensing the futility of my fight, had gone utterly silent in my arms, his face buried in my neck, his small hands clutching my hair. He did not cry. He just held on, his tiny body rigid with a fear that mirrored my own. We drove for an hour, away from the town toward a small, private airstrip I never knew existed. Tucked behind a ridge of pine trees was a jet. It was not large, but it was sleek and white, and it looked like it was worth more than the entire town I had just fled. "This was kidnapping. I was being kidnapped." "No," I said, my voice shaking as Anthony opened the car door. "I'm not getting on that. You cannot force me." Anthony sighed, a sound of professional patience. "Natalie, we can do this respectfully, or we can do this quickly. But we are doing this. Mr. Morello wants to see you." "He wants to see his son," Sal added, his voice gravelly. He was looking at Leo. "He just wants to see the boy." "You have no right," I spat, backing away, but Sal was already retrieving our duffel bag from the trunk, my pathetic little escape bag. "He has been looking for you for 3 years, Anthony said, his tone softening just a fraction. 3 years. He just wants to talk. Please, do not make this harder. For the boy." That was the lever. For the boy. They knew it. He knew it. I looked at the plane, then at the empty, snowy road behind us. I had nowhere to run. My fight in the bus station had been the last twitch of a cornered animal. Now I was just caught. My shoulders slumped. I let Anthony guide me by the elbow up the short steps and into the cabin. The inside smelled of rich leather and something clean and sterile. It was all cream-colored upholstery and polished dark wood. It was the smell of his old apartment, the smell of money and power. I sat down, buckling Leo into the seat beside me, my hands trembling so much I could barely manage the clip. He did not look out the window. He just took his plush lion from the bag and held it to his chest, his dark eyes fixed on me. "Mama?" he whispered. "It is okay, baby," I lied. We are going on a trip." The flight was 4 hours. Sal and Anthony sat near the front, speaking in low tones, leaving us alone. They offered us food, drinks. I refused. I held Leo, my body a shield, and I stared at the cream-colored seat in front of me. My mind raced. I was furious, a hot, acidic rage that burned in my throat. How dare he? After 3 years, how dare he send his men to rip us from the tiny, fragile life I had built? But beneath the fury was the old, cold terror. This was Dominic. He did not do things by halves. He did not just want to talk. He wanted to possess. And underneath that, buried so deep I could barely admit it to myself, was a tremor of something else, a sickening, confusing, microscopic pull, the feeling of an old wound, long scarred over, suddenly aching. I closed my eyes and I remembered. He never raised his hand to me. He never had to. I remembered a dinner at Santino's, before the apartment. Back when I was still just a waitress, he watched. A man at a nearby table, drunk and loud, was complaining about his steak, berating the waitress, Maria. He called her a stupid girl. He threw his napkin at her. Dominic did not look up from his espresso. He was in conversation with Sal. He just lifted his left hand, a simple, dismissive gesture. Sal nodded, got up, and walked over to the man's table. He leaned in and whispered something. I could not hear what he said. The drunk man's face went white, not red with anger, white with sudden, profound sobriety. He dropped a $100 bill on the table, stood up so quickly his chair fell over, and walked out of the restaurant without his coat. Dominic never stopped his conversation. He controlled the air in the room. He did not need to shout. He did not need to threaten. His power was in his presence. It was in the absolute certainty of his men, in the silence that fell when he entered a room. And I had run from him. I had stolen his... I flinched, looking at Leo. I had stolen his son. What would a man like that do to someone who had taken something of his? We landed in Chicago. The air was different, thick, wet, and smelling of exhaust in the lake. A black SUV was waiting on the tarmac, as seamless as the exchange in Colorado. We were driven, not to the old glass apartment, and not to the imposing stone fortress he called his estate. We were taken to a new building, a spire of dark glass downtown. The elevator required a key card, which Sal used. It opened directly into a penthouse. It was magnificent and terrifying. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city glittering like a field of hostile diamonds. The furniture was all low, dark, and minimalist. The kitchen was a sweep of stainless steel and black marble. It was as beautiful, cold, and empty as a high-end crypt. "Your bags will be brought up," Anthony said. "There is food in the refrigerator. Mr. Morello will be here shortly." They left. I heard the slide of the elevator door, and then silence. I walked through the rooms, my heart a cold stone in my chest. A master bedroom with a bed so large it looked obscene. A second bedroom, smaller, already prepared. A new wooden crib stood in the corner, and a small stack of books and new, expensive-looking wooden toys sat on a dresser. He knew. He'd been preparing. This was not an interrogation. This was an installation. He was moving his property. I felt sick. I backed out of the room. Leo, who had not let go of my hand since we left the plane, whimpered. "It is okay, Leo," I whispered, my voice cracking. "It is okay." I led him to the massive sofa in the living room and sat him down. "Stay here with Lion. Just for a minute. Mama is right here." I walked to the window, staring down at the city that had been my prison. I was a bird, brought back to a cage, a bigger, nicer cage, but still a cage. This was not respect. This was distance. He was not bringing me to his home. He was bringing me to a holding cell. I heard the thud of the elevator arriving, the slide of the door. I did not turn. I could not. I just squeezed my eyes shut, my nails digging into my palms. I felt him. The air in the room changed. It grew heavier, charged. He was here. I heard his footsteps, slow and measured, on the hardwood floor. He stopped, perhaps 10 feet behind me. I forced myself to turn. He was the same, and not the same. His dark hair was shorter, perhaps. The lines around his mouth and eyes were deeper, etched into his harsh features by 3 years I'd not seen. He wore a simple black shirt and dark trousers. No suit, no tie. He looked leaner, harder. His eyes, those dark, unreadable eyes, met mine. They were cold. They were assessing. They held all the power in the world. Then his gaze shifted. It moved from my face, down to the small figure on the sofa. Leo had frozen. He was staring at this strange, dark man, his small hand gripping his lion so tightly his knuckles were white. And I saw Dominic Morello change. It was not a large movement. It was a subtle, profound shift. The tension in his shoulders dissolved. The cold assessment in his eyes vanished, replaced by an intense, focused shock, a stillness. He just stared. Leo stared back, his equal in stillness. Dominic took a step, and another. He did not look at me again. His entire world had shrunk to the small boy on the sofa. He slowly, carefully, crouched down, lowering himself to Leo's level. He was a few feet away, a king kneeling before a prince. Leo did not move. He just watched. Dominic's voice, when it came, was not the voice that controlled rooms. It was a rasp, a bare whisper, so quiet I barely heard it. "He has your eyes." He said it to himself, not to me. And that, the intimacy of that discovery, the theft of it, broke the spell. My rage, my terror, my 3 years of running, it all erupted. I moved before I thought. I crossed the space between us and I slapped him. I put every ounce of my fear and my fury into it. My hand cracked across his face, the sound echoing sharp and loud in the vast, silent room. His head snapped to the side. Leo gasped. I stood there, my hand stinging, my entire body vibrating. Dominic did not move for a long moment. He did not touch his face. He just stayed there, crouched. His head turned. Then, slowly, he looked back at me. There was no anger in his eyes. There was nothing. He just absorbed it. He had expected it. He had allowed it. And that, his silent acceptance of my violence, was 1,000 times more terrifying than if he had yelled. He stood up, slowly. He was in control again. "Natalie," he said, his voice flat. "You bastard," I screamed, my voice tearing from my raw throat. "You bastard, you cannot do this. You cannot just take him." "He is my son," he said. Not a question, a statement. "He is my son." I was sobbing now, hot, angry tears. "I am the one who kept him safe. I am the one who fed him, who worked 2 jobs to buy his clothes. Where were you?" "I was looking for you," he said, his voice hardening. "Looking for me? You were hunting me. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted any of this? You kept me. You kept me like a pet in your glass cage. You destroyed any chance I had at a normal life. You destroyed me." "I gave you everything," Marhi said, his voice dropping, getting dangerously low. "You gave me things," I shrieked. "You gave me clothes and a view. You did not give me a choice. And then you send your thugs to drag us back here? Back to this? So you can own him too?" "I did not know," he said. The words were so quiet, they stopped me. I blinked, my tears blurring his face. "What?" "I did not know," he repeated, his jaw tight. "You vanished. I thought you left. I thought you found someone else. I thought—" He stopped. "I did not know you were pregnant." I stared at him. The lie was so audacious, so simple. You are lying. You saw me. You touched my stomach." The memory was so clear, his hand on my belly, the kick. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. I thought you were sick. You said you were sick. You were always hiding." He stepped closer. "You think I would have let you run if I had known? You think I would have let my son spend 3 years in that?" He jested with disgust at my memory of Colorado. I do not believe you," I whispered, but a sliver of doubt, cold and sharp, had pierced my rage. He was a monster, but he was not a chaotic one. If he had known— "You ran," he said, his voice raw. "You ran from me, and you took him." "I ran to protect him." "Protect him from me?" The question hung in the air. He turned from me, walked over to a sleek black cabinet, and pulled out a laptop. He opened it on the kitchen's marble island. "You think I was not looking?" he said. He turned the screen to me. I walked over, my legs unsteady. It was a file, a directory, my aliases. Kate Thompson, Colorado, date of arrival, place of employment, the forged Social Security number. Sarah Jenkins, Utah, a brief 3-month stop right after I left Chicago. Maria Sanchez, Arizona, a 6-month stint. He had tracked all of them. He had been right behind me the whole time. He clicked another file, photos. My breath left me. It was me, pushing Leo on a swing in a snowy Colorado park. me carrying groceries, me asleep on the bus, on the way to Arizona, Leo sleeping on my chest. He had been watching me for years. You knew, I whispered, the blood draining from my face. You knew all this time. Why wait until now? The Social Security flag, he said simply. You were compromised. You were no longer a ghost. You were a liability. If I knew, they could find out. I could not risk it. The other monsters, his rivals. A small, dry sound broke the tension. A cough. We both turned. Leo was still on the sofa, his small face pale, his eyes wide. He coughed again, a nervous, hacking little sound. Everything changed. The argument, the files, the menace, it evaporated. Dominic moved, faster than I'd ever seen him move. He crossed the room in 2 strides and was on his knees in front of Leo, his hands hovering, not knowing where to touch. Is he okay? He asked, his voice rough with a new, unfamiliar panic. He looked at me, his eyes wide. Is he sick? He is just scared, I said, my voice trembling. Dominic's face was a mask of conflict. He wanted to comfort him, but he did not know how. He was a man who commanded armies, and he was terrified of a 3-year-old boy. He slowly, so slowly, reached out one hand. Hey, he whispered, it is okay. You are safe. Leo just stared at him. Then, his eyes flickered down to Dominic's hand and back to his face. Dominic pulled his hand back, as if burned. He stood up, running a hand through his hair, looking lost. He needs to eat, Dominic said, looking around the pristine kitchen. Is he hungry? What does he eat? I can handle it, I said, moving past him, my body vibrating. I needed to do something. I needed to not look at him. That night, I put Leo to bed in the new crib. He fought it, crying for me, until I finally lay down on the floor next to him, my hand through the bars, until his breathing evened out. I needed to wash the day off me. I went into the master bathroom. It was larger than my entire Colorado apartment. A vast, glass-walled shower stood in the center. I turned the water on, as hot as I could stand, and stepped inside. And I broke. I slid down the marble wall, my clothes still on, and I sobbed. I cried for the life I had lost, for the quiet peace of the mountains. I cried out of guilt. Had I been wrong to run? Had I robbed my son of this protection? And I cried because, God help me, I was so tired of being strong. I was so tired of being alone. A part of me, a weak, stupid, treacherous part, was glad the running was over. I cried because the man in the other room, the monster who had just ripped my life apart again, was the only person on earth who made me feel, in a terrifying, possessive way, safe. I stayed until the water ran cold. I found a new plush robe hanging on the door. Of course he had thought of that. I walked out, toweling my hair, my old, worn-out clothes in a wet pile on the floor. He was standing on the other side of the massive bedroom, near the door. He had not moved. He was just waiting. There are clothes in the closet, he said, his voice quiet. I had them sent over. I just nodded, unable to speak. This is your room, he said, gesturing to the suite. I am in the one down the hall. The doors lock from the inside. I looked at him, and he was offering me an escape, a small one. You do not owe me anything, Natalie, he said. His voice was flat, but his eyes were burning. They were locked on my face, full of a hunger and a pain that contradicted his words. His eyes said, You owe me everything. You owe me him. You owe me you. He turned and left, closing the door softly behind him. I did not sleep. I dressed in a pair of silk pajamas I found in the drawer, another violation, another calculated provision, and I lay in the massive, empty bed. Hours passed. The city lights were too bright. I got up. I walked to the window of my room. It connected to a long balcony, the same one that ran the length of the penthouse. And I saw him. He was at the other end, 20 yards away, leaning against the railing, staring out at the lake. His black shirt was unbuttoned, the sleeves rolled up his forearms, the wind was whipping his hair. He was holding a glass of amber liquid. He was so perfectly still, a predator at rest. He looked powerful, and he looked profoundly, devastatingly alone. Something inside my chest, something I had kept frozen for 3 years, stirred. It cracked, like ice in a thaw, a painful, unwelcome heat. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering. I finally fell asleep, just before dawn, into a restless, heavy doze. And I dreamed. I dreamed of the glass apartment. I was on the sofa, reading. He came home, not with the smell of cold, but the smell of wine and expensive cigars. He did not speak. He just came over to me, took the book from my hands, and knelt. He put one hand on my knee, his thumb tracing circles. Then he leaned in, his face close to mine, his eyes dark. He did not kiss my mouth. He turned his head, his lips brushing the side of my jaw, moving down to the soft, vulnerable pulse point on my neck. He just rested his mouth there, breathing me in. His lips were so warm, so careful. His hand moved from my knee to my waist, pulling me slightly toward him. It was not violent. It was not rushed. It was a slow, deliberate claiming. I woke up with a gasp. I was in the cold, empty penthouse bed. My skin was tingling where his mouth had been in the dream. I was breathless. I was confused, and I was terrified. Not of him. I was terrified of myself. I woke up to the synthetic chime of the elevator. Sal and Anthony entered, carrying bags from what looked like the most expensive children's store in Chicago. Dominic was in the kitchen, drinking an espresso, his back to me. He was dressed in a gray suit that probably cost more than my entire year's rent in Colorado. He looked like the boss again. "He cannot stay here," I said, my voice hoarse. Dominic turned, his face an impassive mask. "Good morning." "I am not doing this, Anand," I said, my hands balling into fists. "I am not your prisoner. Leo is not your property. I am taking him, and I am going back to Colorado. I am Kate Thompson. We have a life." "Kate Thompson," he said, the name sounding like acid on his tongue. "The woman with the flagged Social Security number. The woman who works 70 hours a week at a diner and a cleaning service. The woman who lives in a 2-room apartment above a bar that smells like stale beer. That is the life you want for him?" "It is a safe life," I shot back. "It is a real life. It is not this." "It was not safe," he said, his voice dropping. He stepped toward me. "If I found you, they could have... Do you understand what they would have done to you? To get to me. What they would have done to him." I flinched. He saw it and softened his tone. "I cannot let you go back there. It is not safe." "So what?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "I'm just supposed to stay here, in this glass box, forever? What kind of life is that?" He looked at me for a long time. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of options. He was a man who never compromised. "1 week," he said. I blinked. "What?" "Give me 1 week. 7 days." He held up his hand, stopping my protest. "In 7 days, I can secure you. I can create a new identity for you, a real one. Ironclad, I can set you up, wherever you want to go. A house, money, a life where you never have to look over your shoulder again. A life where he nodded toward Leo's room, can be a normal kid." I stared at him, suspicious. "And if I do not? Then I cannot protect you, and you will be found, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And the men who find you will not be mine." It was a threat, wrapped in a promise, but it was also a choice. The first one he had ever given me. "And after 1 week," I whispered, "if I still want to leave?" His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping. "If you're after 7 days, you still want to take him and go, I will not stop you." I did not believe him, not really, but looking at the bags Sal was unpacking, tiny cashmere sweaters and shoes that cost more than my car, I knew I had no other option. 1 week, The next few days were a surreal fever dream. Dominic was true to his word, but he did not do it by halves. On day 2, a pediatrician arrived, not at an office. He came to the penthouse, an older, kind-faced Italian man named Dr. Rossi. He treated Leo with a gentle reverence, as if he were a young prince. Dominic stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his suit jacket off, looking more tense than I'd ever seen him. "He is healthy, Doctor," Rossi pronounced, letting Leo listen to his own heart with the stethoscope. A little underweight for his age, perhaps, but strong. "He will have the best of everything," Dominic said, his voice quiet. The next day, a woman came, a child development specialist. She did not talk down to Leo. She got on the floor with him and his plush lion, and within an hour, my quiet, watchful son was babbling, stacking intricate wooden blocks and pointing at pictures in a book. Dominic watched from the kitchen island, pretending to work, but his eyes never left Leo. I saw him studying the boy, his expression a mixture of profound pride and a deep, aching regret. He was sparing no expense. He was buying his way into fatherhood. I wanted to hate him for it. I wanted to tell him that tutors and doctors did not make up for 3 years of silence. But I could not, because I saw Leo blossom, my son, who had only ever known thrift store toys and a tired, stressed-out mother, was suddenly the center of an entire universe. He was thriving, and the tiny, cold kernel of my anger began to thaw, replaced by a confusing, reluctant gratitude. On the 4th day, Dominic came home early. He was not carrying a briefcase. He was holding a small, simple wooden box. "I brought something," he said, "not to me, to Leo." Leo looked up from his blocks. Dominic knelt just as he had the first day and slid the box across the floor. "For you." Leo looked at me, asking for permission. I nodded and he crept forward and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on dark velvet, was a lion. It was not a stuffed toy. It was a work of art, carved from a rich, warm wood, its joints articulated with tiny wooden pegs. Its mane was made of soft, dark fur. It was beautiful, and it looked ancient. "His name is Leon," Dominic said, his voice soft. "An old man. An old friend of my family. He made him. He used to make them for me when I was a boy." Leo reached in and touched the wooden lion. He then looked at his own, worn-out plush lion, the one I had bought him. He picked up the new one, his small fingers tracing the carved muscles. He then did something that stopped my heart. He walked over to Dominic, who was still kneeling, and held the wooden lion up. "Lion," Leo said. His voice was clear. Dominic stared. "Lion," Leo said again, pushing it toward him. "Play." Dominic's throat worked. He looked utterly, completely lost. He slowly reached out and took the toy. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, Leo, we play." I watched them for an hour, the mafia boss and his son, sitting on the expensive rug, making the wooden lion stalk the plush one, and for the first time, I did not see Dominic Morello. I saw a father. That night, I could not sleep. The kiss I had dreamed of, the real memories, the sight of him on the floor with our son, it was all too much. I went to the kitchen, seeking the cold comfort of the marble floors and a glass of water. He was there. The lights were dim. Only the glow from under the cabinets was on. He was standing at the stove, in his shirt sleeves, his back to me. He was cooking. The smell of garlic and olive oil filled the air. He was not good at it. He was stirring the pasta too aggressively. The garlic was browning too fast. "You are burning it," I said quietly. He startled, turning. His hair was messy. He looked tired. I could not sleep. "I can tell." I walked over, taking the wooden spoon from his hand. Our fingers brushed. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up my arm. I pulled back. I am sorry," he said. "Let me," I said, turning the heat down. "You have to move the garlic fast. You cannot let it sit." He did not move away. He stood beside me, leaning against the counter. He was too close. I could feel the heat radiating off his body. "Where did you learn?" he asked. "My grandmother. Before she passed, it was all we ate." He was quiet for a moment. "My nonna, she made this." He reached past me, grabbing a bottle of red wine from the counter. He opened it. His movements economical and strong. He poured 2 glasses, not asking, and handed one to me. I took it. I drank. The wine was rich and warm. We stood there, in the silence, sharing the small space. He chopped parsley, his movements surprisingly precise. I drained the pasta. We did not talk about Colorado. We did not talk about the men outside the door. We talked about food, about his grandmother's sauce, about the smell of my diner in the mornings. He told me about Giuseppe, the toy maker, how the old man had been a friend of his father's, and how he had looked out for Dominic after his parents died. He spoke of his childhood, not in detail, but in sketches of loneliness, of alleys and old men. I found myself listening, seeing the man behind the monster. And then he made a joke. Something dry about how Sal, his man, could not cook to save his life. I laughed. It was not a small chuckle. It was a real, genuine, unrestrained laugh. The sound bounced off the cold marble and startled us both. Dominic stopped what he was doing. He turned and just looked at me. His expression was one of intense, profound discovery. "I have never heard you laugh," he whispered. The air charged, growing thick and heavy. The smell of garlic and wine and him was suffocating. My heart was not hammering. It was beating a slow, heavy drumbeat, deep in my chest. He was so close. He lifted his hand, the one that had held a gun, the one that had signed orders, and he brushed the hair back from my temple. His knuckles were rough, and they grazed my cheek. I shivered. I did not pull away. God help me. I did not want to... "Natalie," he breathed. He leaned in. It was not a claiming. It was not possession. It was a question. His lips met mine. It was slow. It was charged with 4 years of silence, of fear, of running, of unspoken longing. It was hesitant at first, just a press, a test. And then, as I failed to move, as my body betrayed me and leaned into his, the kiss deepened. It was not hungry. It was starving. It tasted of wine and salt. One of his hands moved to my waist. The other cradled my jaw, his thumb stroking my skin. It was everything I remembered from my dreams, and it was everything I had been terrified of. It was warm, and it was real, and it was happening. I kissed him back. I let my hands rest on his chest, feeling the solid, living beat of his heart under my palms. Then, reality crashed in. This was him. This was the man who had kept me. The man I had run from. The man who had hunted me. I gasped, breaking the kiss. I pushed against his chest, stumbling back. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling. "No, I cannot want this again." He looked stunned. His lips were parted, his eyes dark and dilated. He did not reach for me. He just watched me, his chest rising and falling. "I cannot be that girl again," I said, tears burning my eyes. I am not your property." His face hardened. He straightened up, the vulnerability vanishing, the mask slamming back down. He nodded once, sharp. "Go to bed, Natalie." The next day was the 6th day. I was raw, exhausted, and confused. I needed to get out. "I am taking Leo to the park," I announced. Dominic looked up from his phone. "Anthony and Sal will go with you." It was not a request. We went to a park, not a public one. It was a private, manicured space on the rooftop of a nearby building, another property he owned. It was sterile and safe. Leo ran, ecstatic to be outside, chasing a ball. Sal stood by the entrance. Anthony stood by me. "You're good with him," Anthony said quietly. I glanced at him, surprised. He had barely spoken to me. "He's a good kid. Mr. Morello. He's a different man since you came back." "He is a monster," I said, my voice flat. Anthony looked at me. Maybe. But he is the only monster who has spent 3 years searching for a ghost. He could have moved on. He did not. I did not know what to say to that. I turned back to Leo, and I saw him across the street on the roof of the opposite building. A man. He was not admiring the view. He was holding a camera with a long lens. He was aiming it right at us, right at Leo. My blood turned to ice. It was not a tourist. It was not paparazzi. And he was dressed in dark clothes, and the way he held the camera was professional. "Anthony," I whispered, my voice tight. "Look, across the street, rooftop." Anthony's head snapped up. He did not pause. He did not assess. "Sal, we are compromised!" he yelled. He grabbed my arm. "Inside. Now. Move!" He half shoved me toward the door. Yelling into his sleeve, Sal scooped up a protesting Leo and ran. We were in the elevator, plunging down, before I even took a breath. When we got back to the penthouse, Dominic was waiting. His face was white with a rage I had never seen. "What happened?" "A spotter," Anthony said. "Long lens, on the opposite roof. Not one of ours." I was shaking. He was taking pictures of Leo. Dominic's eyes closed. He said a word in Italian, a curse that sounded like a prayer. "It is starting," he said. "Who?" I demanded. "Who is they? Who is doing this?" Dominic looked at me, his eyes cold and hard. "My world, my associates, they are not pleased." I remembered, then, flashes from my time at Santino's, the other men who came to sit at table 4, older men, with heavy-lidded eyes and expensive rings. They were polite to me, but they looked at me like I was a piece of furniture, a convenience. And I remembered one, Vacchia. He had eyes like a shark. He had once looked at me, then at Dominic, and said, "A distraction. They make you weak. Domenico." Dominic had just smiled, "Only if you let them." But now, Leo was not a distraction. He was an heir. He was leverage. "They know about him," I whispered, the horror dawning. "They know he exists." "They know," Dominic confirmed, his voice deadly quiet. "And you are the woman who holds him. You are my only weakness. You ran once, Natalie, to protect him from me." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. "But now you are not running from me. You are running from them. And they will not offer you a week. They will not buy you silk pajamas. They will take the boy and they will slit your throat, just to see what I do." That night, I could not sleep. I put Leo in his crib, but I dragged it into my room. I locked the bedroom door. I sat in a chair, watching him breathe, every sound in the hallway making me jump. Sometime after 3 a.m, I must have dozed off. I was woken by a scream. It was Leo. I was out of the chair, my heart stopping. I fumbled with the lock on my door, wrenching it open. The hallway was dark. "Leo!" Another scream. I ran. Dominic's door flew open at the same time. He was already moving, gun in hand, wearing only a pair of dark pajama pants. He was a shadow of coiled muscle and absolute menace. I saw them in the main living room by the elevator. The elevator doors were open. They should not have been. A man was on the floor. Sal was standing over him, but there was another man, dressed in black, a mask over his face, and he was in the hallway. He was 20 feet from Leo's door. He was between me and Dominic. He raised a gun, not at Dominic, but at me. I did not even have time to scream. 2 sounds, deafening, right next to my ear. Pop, pop. Dominic had not hesitated. He had moved in front of me, shielding me with his body, and he had fired. The man in the hallway crumpled, his gun clattering on the hardwood. Silence. The smell of gunpowder. Leo was screaming, a high-pitched, terrified wail. "Mama, Mama!" I could not move. My ears were ringing. There was a man, a dead man, in the hallway. He was coming for... Dominic did not look at the body. He checked the living room. Sal was already on the phone, his own gun out, the other intruder groaning, and then he moved. He shoved his gun into the waistband of his pants and stormed past me, into Leo's room. I staggered after him. Leo was standing in his crib, his face wet with tears, his small body shaking. Dominic was there first. He scooped him up, pulling him hard against his bare chest. "Shh, Mio Leone, shh, it is okay. You are safe." He buried his face in Leo's hair, his large body trembling. "Papa is here. I have got you. You are safe." I reached the doorway, my legs giving out. He was comforting my son, our son. He had just killed a man to protect us. The adrenaline, the terror, the sight of Dominic holding Leo, the word Papa, it all broke me. A sound tore out of my throat, a dry, ragged sob. I slid down the doorframe, my whole body shaking in a violent, uncontrollable tremor. I could not stop. I was going to shake apart. They got in. They were in. They were in the penthouse. Dominic looked up, his eyes wild. He saw me, a heap on the floor, shaking. He looked at the dead man in the hall, then at me. "Sal, what?" he roared. Sal appeared, his face grim. "Boss." "Take him," Dominic ordered, his voice breaking. He handed Leo, still sobbing, to the bodyguard. "Kitchen, get him some milk. Do not leave him." Sal took Leo and disappeared. Dominic was at my side in an instant. He knelt in front of me. "Natalie, look at me." I could not. I was shaking, my teeth chattering. He did not say anything else. He just gathered me up. He pulled me into his arms, lifting me from the floor as if I weighed nothing, and held me against his chest. I was so cold. He was so warm. "I have got you," he whispered, his voice raw. "I have got you. They are gone. You are safe." I buried my face in his neck, my hands clutching his shirt, and I sobbed. I cried out all the fear, all the years of running, all the terror of the last 5 minutes. He held me. He held me as Sal made quiet calls. He held me as other men arrived. Men in dark suits who moved with quiet efficiency, removing the bodies, cleaning the floor. He never let me go. He held me through the entire night. When the gray light of dawn finally touched the windows, he was still holding me, sitting on the floor of the hallway, my back against his chest. My shaking had finally subsided to a fine tremor. He stirred. "Come on," he whispered. He led me into his room, not mine, his. He sat me on the edge of his bed. He looked broken. His face was gray with exhaustion and a lingering, savage fear. "They almost," I whispered, my voice gone. He was coming for Leo." "They will never," he said, his voice a low growl. "Ever. Get close to him again." He sat next to me. He did not touch me. I looked at him. The mask was gone. The boss was gone. This was a man who had almost lost the only thing he had ever, in his entire dark life, cared about. He was vulnerable. I reached out and touched his face. My fingers trembled against his rough stubble. He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch. That was all it took. The fear, the relief, the shared terror. It was a bond stronger than any romantic night. I did not plan it. I did not think. I just acted. I leaned in, tangled my fingers in his hair, and pulled his mouth down to mine. It was not a kiss of whine and hesitation. It was a collision. It was desperate. It was raw, and it was real. It was a claim. "You are alive. I am alive. We are alive." His hands came up, gripping my shoulders, his fingers digging in, anchoring me, his forehead pressed against mine, his breath ragged, mingling with mine. He kissed me like a man who had been starved, but it was not hunger for sex. It was hunger for life. He pulled me against him, and we fell back into the bed. Every movement was intense, but it was tender. It was a desperate need to erase the cold of the hallway, the smell of gunpowder. His hands were everywhere, in my hair, on my back, tracing my jaw, as if memorizing me, confirming I was real. I clung to him, my body molding to his, seeking the solid, living warmth of him. This was not about love. Not yet. It was about survival. It was about finding the only other person in the eye of the storm. We stayed like that, tangled together, our eyes locked, breathing each other in until the sun was high in the sky. I woke up first, hours later. The room was bright. I was wrapped in his arms, my head on his chest. Sal had, at some point, moved Leo's crib into this room, by the window. My son was sleeping peacefully, his plush lion next to his new wooden one. We were all in the same room, a broken, terrified, makeshift family. I watched Dominic. His face, in the clear morning light, was softened in sleep. The harsh lines were smoothed. He looked younger, vulnerable. The man who had held me while I sobbed, the man who had killed for me. I hated him. I hated him for bringing this world to my door. But as I lay there, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart under my ear, I realized a cold, terrifying truth. The danger was real. I had seen it. It had a face and a gun. And the protection was real too, and it was lying right next to me, breathing softly in his sleep. The morning after the attack, the penthouse was silent. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the dead, sterile quiet of a crime scene. Sal and his men, all in fresh suits, moved through the rooms with a grim, quiet efficiency. Leo's crib and all his new toys had been moved back to his own room. The illusion of our makeshift family, forged in terror, had evaporated with the dawn. Dominic was already dressed when I emerged from his room. He was in a dark suit, his back to me, standing at the window and speaking in low, rapid Italian on his phone. He sounded like a general regrouping his army. He finished the call and turned to me. His face was a mask of cold control, but his eyes were raw, as if he had not slept at all. "Pack what you need," he said. It was not a request. "We are leaving." My heart seized. "Leaving? Leaving where? You promised a new life. Spain." "No," he said, his voice flat. "The penthouse is compromised. This building is compromised. We are going to the estate." I froze. The estate. I had never seen it, but I had heard the whispers at Santino's. The fortress. The old-world mansion north of the city, passed down from his father. The place where he held his real meetings. The place with walls and gates. The place no one got into. Or out of. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, Dominic, that's a cage. It is the only safe place for him in this city." "Then we leave the city. Your 1 week is over. The deal is done. You said you would get me a new life." "The deal changed," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "When they came through that elevator, they know he exists. They know where he exists. We're not running. Natalie, we are digging in." "I am not your prisoner," I cried, my voice rising. "I am not the girl from the glass apartment anymore. I will not be locked up again." He strode across the room until he was standing directly in front of me, his height and his power swallowing the air between us. I flinched, expecting him to yell, to grab me. Instead, he just looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Do you think I do not know that?" he said, his voice low and rough. "Do you think I have not seen the woman you have become, the woman who fought my men in a bus station, the woman who survived for 3 years alone?" He took a step back, breaking the intensity. "The estate is not a cage. It is a fortress. You will not be a prisoner. You will be safe. You will have autonomy. But you will not leave." He was consulting me, but it was a consultation wrapped in a command. I saw the truth of it. I had nowhere else to go. That dead man in the hallway. He had been coming for my son. "Fine," I whispered, defeated. "But if I feel those walls closing in, Dominic, I will burn them down." He nodded once. I would expect nothing less. The estate was terrifying. It was 20 miles north of the city, hidden from the road by a 10-foot stone wall in a forest of old-growth trees. The gates were iron and manned by men with guns who did not look like Sal or Anthony. These men looked like they had been carved from the same stone as the walls. The house itself was a sprawling mansion of dark brick and ivy, a place of shadows and history. It was the complete opposite of the cold, modern penthouse. This place had roots. This place had ghosts. We were given a wing, not just a room, a full suite of rooms, a bedroom for me, an adjoining one for Leo, a small, bright sitting room, and a marble bathroom. It was beautiful, opulent and utterly suffocating. "I will not be trapped in here," I told him, standing in the middle of the sitting room, my arms crossed. "You will not be," he said. He led me down the hall to a massive study, his own. He gestured to a bank of monitors on the wall. "This is the security feed. You have access to all of it. This." He touched a button on an intercom. "Goes directly to Sal. If you need anything at any time, he will get it. You are free to walk the grounds. They are extensive and secure." He was giving me the keys to the cage. It was a strange, disorienting shift in power. I need to check on someone," I said, my voice small. "My friend Sarah, the one who helped me in Chicago." His eyes hardened. "I know who she is. A nurse at County. I have already had her vetted." My blood ran cold. You vetted her? What did you do to her?" "Nothing," he said, holding up a hand. "I ran her name. I checked her financials. I made sure she is who she says she is. She is clean. She lives a quiet life. She has not spoken your name in 3 years. She is loyal. You chose a good friend." "You had no right," I whispered. "I had every right," he countered, his voice firm. "I am locking down our communications. I am locking down everything. There are no more blind spots. Natalie, not with his life on the line." He was not just protecting me. He was protecting his son. He was consulting me. But he was still Dominic. He was still in control. The next few days were quiet. A tense, fragile domesticity settled over us. We ate all our meals together in a dining room so large our voices echoed. Dominic worked from his study, but he would emerge at precisely 5 OL every day to spend an hour with Leo before his bedtime. He was a natural father. It was the most shocking thing I'd ever seen. He was patient. He was gentle. He would sit on the floor, this man of violence and shadows, and let his son drive toy trucks over his suit trousers. Leo, in turn, blossomed under the attention. He was no longer the quiet, watchful ghost of Colorado. He was a loud, happy, confident little boy. One morning, we were at breakfast. I was drinking coffee, and Dominic was reading some report, his brow furrowed. Leo was coloring. His tongue stuck out in concentration. "Daddy," Leo said, his voice clear in the quiet room. I froze, my mug halfway to my lips. Dominic's head snapped up. He stared at Leo. He had not used the word since the night of the attack, and never so casually. "Daddy," Leo said again, holding up his drawing. "Look, a lion." Dominic put his report down. He looked at Leo, and then he looked at me. A quick, uncertain glance. "That is a great lion. Mio Leone," Dominic said, his voice a little rough. Leo beamed. Then he looked at Dominic with the devastating, simple clarity of a 3-year-old. "Daddy, are you staying forever?" The silence in the room was absolute. My breath caught. Forever. Dominic stared at his son. I saw a man who had only ever thought in terms of now, of threats and advantages, suddenly confronted with a concept he had never applied to himself. He was a man of temporary arrangements, of glass apartments and silent exits. Forever was not in his vocabulary. He reached out and ruffled Leo's dark hair. "I'm not going anywhere, Leo," he said softly. He looked at me over Leo's head. His eyes were dark and full of a question he did not know how to ask. "Is this what we are doing? Forever?" I could not answer. I just looked away, my heart hammering a confusing, painful rhythm. The outside world, which had felt so distant behind the stone walls, crashed in 2 days later. Sal entered the study where I was reading, Dominic at his desk. He was holding a folded newspaper, his face grim. "Boss, you need to see this." Dominic took it. I watched his face as he unfolded it. His expression went from neutral to cold, to a silent, white-hot rage. "What is it?" I asked, standing up. He did not answer. He just slid the paper across the massive oak desk. It was a tabloid, the Sun-Times, and on the front page, above the fold, was a blurry, grainy photograph. It was me, holding Leo's hand, on the street outside the penthouse. Anthony was a blur behind us. It was the picture from the man on the roof. The headline was explosive. "Morello's mystery heir, mob boss's secret family emerges." My legs went weak. I gripped the desk. "Oh, God." "They published it," I whispered. They know his face." "The phones have not stopped ringing," Sal said, his voice low. "Your associates, boss, Vacchia, the Trovatos, they are concerned. They see this as a liability." "They see him as leverage," Dominic corrected, his voice a snarl. "Get security on high alert. No one in or out without my personal authorization. Double the patrol on the wall." "Yes, boss." Sal left, closing the heavy doors behind him. "That is it," I said, the words tumbling out. I was shaking. "That is the end. We are leaving. Now. Today." "Natalie." "Do not Natalie me," I yelled. "You promised. You said you would protect him. This is not protection, Dominic. This is a death sentence. You have painted a target on my son's back. We have to go." I ran from the study, back to our wing, and started pulling clothes from the drawers, throwing them into the duffel bag I had arrived with. The old, familiar panic was back, choking me. He followed me, and he stood in the doorway, his large frame blocking the light. "Stop, Aaron," he said. "No, I am done. I am taking him, and I am running. You said you would make us a new life. Make it. Spain, Argentina. I do not care. But we are gone." "And where do you think you will go?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Away from you! Away from this!" "Do you really think that will work?" he said, walking into the room. "You ran for 3 years when you were a ghost. Now your face and his face are on the front page of a newspaper. You think you will last 3 days? So we hide." "There is nowhere to hide. Natalie," he roared, and I flinched. He had never raised his voice to me like that. "Not from them. The only safe place for you on this entire planet is right here, with me." "Safe?" I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "This is not safe. This is a war, and you have put us in the middle of it. This is what you always wanted, is not it? You just could not stand that I got away. You had to have me back. You had to pull my strings again. You are doing it right now, lying to me, trapping me, telling me it is for my own good. You are no different than you were in that glass apartment." He snapped. It was not a punch. It was not a move toward me. He turned and swept his arm across the mahogany dresser, sending a lamp, a water glass, and a stack of my books crashing to the floor. The sound of smashing porcelain echoed in the silence. "Liar!" he yelled, his voice raw, cracking with an emotion I had never heard. I stared at him, my anger evaporating, replaced by a sudden, cold fear. This was not the controlled boss. This was someone broken. "You think this is about control?" he said, his voice dropping, trembling with the force of his words. You think this is guilt?" He was breathing heavily, his back to me, his hands braced on the wall. "Guilt is easy, Natalie," he whispered. "Guvacchia. I could feel guilty. But this," he turned, and his face was a mask of such raw anguish that it stole my breath. "This is torture." He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes wild. "For my entire life, 35 years, I have built this thing, this world, and everything in it was just that. A thing, a car, a building, a restaurant, things I could buy or sell or break, things I could replace." He took a step toward me, and I saw, with a sense of profound shock, that his eyes were wet. "I have never," he said, his voice breaking, "ever loved anything, not one thing, that I could hold in my arms. His gaze flickered to Leo's room, then back to me. His voice was barely a whisper. "Until you two." The confession hung in the air, heavier and more devastating than his rage. It was the truth, the raw, unvarnished, terrifying truth. I did not move. I could not. He had just handed me his entire broken heart. My anger, my fear, it all dissolved, washed away by the tide of his pain. I saw him, not the monster, not the boss, just Dominic, the man who had sat on the floor with our son, the man who had woken up in the night to check his breathing. I took a step, and another. I reached out and touched his arm. His muscles were corded, tight as steel. "Dominic," I whispered. He looked down at my hand, then up at my face. He looked lost. And then he pulled me in. It was not a kiss. It was a collision. It was a dam breaking. His mouth crashed down on mine, hungry, desperate, and full of years of unspoken everything. It was not the tenderness of the night of the attack. This was raw. This was 4 years of searching, of longing, of a loneliness so deep I had only just seen the bottom of it. His hands were in my hair, gripping my head, holding my face to his as if he was drowning and I was air. And I kissed him back. I kissed him with all the fear and all the loneliness and all the stupid, treacherous longing I had carried with me over 1,000 miles. My hands gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, anchoring myself to him. It was not a surrender. It was an admission. It was a confession from both of us. We broke apart, breathless, our foreheads pressed together. His breathing was ragged. "I ran," I whispered, the words I had never been able to say. I ran because I was so scared. I did not know. I did not know if you'd keep us or if you'd own us. He pulled back, just enough to meet my eyes. His gaze was fierce, and the last of his masks had burned away. "You are not property, Natalie," he said, his voice thick. He cupped my jaw, his thumb brushing away a tear I did not know had fallen. "You are not a thing. You are mine, but not like that." He searched for the words. "You are my family." He kissed me again, slower this time, a promise. That night, the storm passed. The arguing was done. We were in the kitchen, a vast, cavernous room, but we were together. I was making pasta, the simple, real kind. Dominic was helping. He was terrible at it, but he was there. Leo was at the massive kitchen table, drawing. The silence was comfortable, normal. He held up his drawing. It was, as always, a picture of his lion, but this time, there were 3 stick figures next to it, one tall, one medium, one small. "Look," he said, his voice bright. He pointed to the medium one, Mama. He pointed to the small one, Leo. Then, he pointed to the tall, slightly menacing stick figure. "Dad," he said. He said it so simply, so easily. The wooden spoon in my hand clattered into the pot. Dominic, who had been trying to chop parsley, froze. He looked at Leo. He looked at me. A slow, tentative smile spread across his face. It was the first real, unguarded smile I had ever seen from him. It transformed his harsh features, made him look young. He walked over to Leo, kneeling by his chair. He gently touched the drawing. "Yeah, Leo," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Dad." The moment was perfect, a small, fragile bubble of peace in the middle of a war. It was, of course, the moment it had to burst. A private, internal phone on the kitchen wall rang, its shrill cry cutting through the warmth. Dominic's smile vanished. He was the boss again. He crossed the kitchen and answered it. "Yeah." He listened. I watched his body go rigid, the blood drained from his face, leaving it a sickly, pale gray. "Where?" he asked, his voice sharp. He listened again, his eyes closing briefly. "Lock it down, now!" He slammed the phone down. "Dominic?" I whispered, my heart turning to ice. "What is it?" He did not look at me, and he was staring at Leo. The kitchen doors burst open, and Sal ran in, his face grim, his hand on his weapon. "Boss, we got word. The Vacchia family. They put out a contract." "I will handle Dominic snarled. "I will cut his throat myself." "Boss," Sal said, his voice low and urgent, cutting him off. "You do not understand. The contract, it is not on you." Dominic stopped. He slowly, so slowly, turned to look at Sal. Sal's gaze flickered to me, just for a second, and then back to his boss. "They're not going after you," Sal said. "They're going after her." The moment Sal said my name, the world snapped into a new, terrifying focus. The warmth of the kitchen, the smell of parsley, the sound of Leo humming, it all evaporated, replaced by the arctic cold of Dominic's gaze as he looked at me. I was not a person, I was a target. "Sal," Dominic said, his voice a low, lethal calm, "take them to the wing. Now, institute Protocol Omega. No one in or out of this estate, no one. And get Anthony. I want him on her. 24/7. Am I clear?" "Boss?" Sal nodded, grabbing my arm. "No," I said, pulling away. "Dominic, what are you going to do?" He walked to me, ignoring Sal. He cupped my face, his hands hard, his eyes boring into mine. The man who had smiled at his son moments ago was gone. This was the general. "You," he said, "are going to stay where I tell you to stay. You are going to listen to what I tell you to do, and you are going to let me keep you alive. This is no longer a discussion. I'm not your prisoner." "You are a target," he snarled, his grip tightening. "My target, which means you are my responsibility. Now go." He released me and turned, already mapping out his war. Sal gently herded me and a confused Leo, who was clutching his drawing, out of the kitchen. The next morning, the estate was a fortress. The number of guards at the gate had tripled, men I had never seen before. All dark suits and hard eyes, patrolled the perimeter with dogs. The fragile peace was over. We were at war. Dominic did not come to the wing. He was in his study, in meetings, his voice a low, angry rumble that I could sometimes hear through the heavy oak doors. He appeared on the second day. I was in the sitting room, watching Leo build a tower, my entire body humming with a fear so profound it felt like a sickness. He did not say hello. "Come with me." I followed him, my heart hammering. He led me down to the sub-basement, a place of stone and cold air. At the end of a long hallway, he unlocked a heavy steel door. It was a shooting range, clean, soundproofed, and smelling of oil and gunpowder. A small, sleek, black handgun was sitting on the polished wooden counter. "No," I said, stopping in the doorway. I will not." He turned. His face was pale with exhaustion, but his eyes were steel. "Do you remember the man in the penthouse? The one who was 20 feet from your son's room?" I flinched. "He was one. There are dozens more. They will not hesitate. They will not stop. Sal and Anthony are the best. My men are the best. But if they fail, if one gets through, you are the last line of defense. You will not be helpless, Natalie. I will not allow it." I looked at the gun. It was the physical manifestation of everything I hated. It was the tool of his world, the thing that had orphaned him, the thing that had almost taken him from me. "I cannot, Dominic." He walked to me, did not grab me, he did not yell. He just took my hands. They were trembling. "Yes, you can," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "You are the woman who survived 3 years with nothing. You are the woman who clawed at my men in a bus station to protect her son. You have more steel in you than half the men I employ. Now pick it up." He led me to the counter, and he stood behind me. I could feel the warmth of his chest against my back. His presence was an anchor in the cold room. "It is heavy," I whispered, my fingers touching the metal. "It should be," he said, his hands covering mine, guiding my grip. "It has weight. It has consequence." He showed me how to hold it, his arms around me, his body molding to mine. His breath was warm on my ear. "You point. You align the sights, you breathe out, and you squeeze. You do not jerk, you squeeze. He loaded a magazine and slid it into place with a sound that made me jump. He placed my finger on the trigger. Now. I stared at the paper target, a black silhouette of a man. My arms were shaking so badly I could barely aim. I closed my eyes and pulled. The sound was deafening. A sharp crack that vibrated through my bones. The gun jumped in my hands, the kick jarring my shoulder. I cried out. "Open your eyes," he commanded, his voice firm in my ear. "You never close your eyes. Look at your target." I had missed the paper entirely. "Again." He settled my grip. "Breathe, squeeze." I fired. This time I hit the outer ring. "Again." I fired and fired and fired. I emptied the magazine. The smell of gunpowder stinging my nose, my shoulder aching. I reloaded. I fired again. I did not stop until my hands were steady. I did not stop until the center of the target was a single, ragged hole. I put the gun down, my entire body humming. I hated it. I hated the power. I hated the necessity. I turned to face him. He was watching me, his expression unreadable. "Good," he said. I looked at the ruined target. This is not a life, Dominic." "It is our life," he said, "for now." "There has to be another way," I pleaded, my voice hoarse. We could run. You promised a new life. Spain, Europe, new names. We could just disappear. Let them have this world. What is it worth? What is it worth compared to him? His face tightened. He looked away from me, toward the targets. "You think it is that simple to just walk away?" "Yes, you are Dominic Morello. You can do anything." "No, I cannot," he said, his voice flat. "This," he gestured to the estate, the city beyond. "This is not just a business. It is a kingdom. It is what my father built. It is what I rebuilt from the ashes. It is my name. It is all I am. It is a prison," I said softly. "It is a prison, and you are sentencing your son to a life inside it." He looked wounded. "To leave now. To run. It is a sign of weakness. They will not stop. They will hunt us. They will hunt you to the ends of the earth, and the only way to leave is to win. To end this." "To win a war," I whispered, the cold dread returning. "To protect my family." He did not have to say anything else. I knew. We were not running. We were fighting. The tension in the estate was suffocating. Every slam of a door, every footstep in the hall made me jump. Leo, sensing the fear, was quiet and clingy. He spent his days in our wing, building towers and asking where Dad was. Dominic was in his study, a virtual prisoner himself, surrounded by Sal, Anthony, and a revolving door of his most trusted men. He was a general in his bunker, mapping out a strategy. I saw him only at night. He would come into the wing long after Leo was asleep, his face a gray mask of exhaustion and stress. He would stand at the foot of my bed and just watch me. He did not try to touch me. He did not climb into the bed. He just stood, a silent guardian, until I would finally drift into a restless sleep. One afternoon, I was sitting with Leo, trying to read him a story, but my mind was a million miles away. He grew bored and went to his small table, picking up his crayons. He was quiet for a long time. "Mama," he said, holding up a piece of paper. I looked. It was his drawing, the 3 stick figures, the tall one, the medium one, the small one. But this time, they were not just standing next to each other. He had drawn them all holding hands. Above them, he had drawn a big, rambling house, the estate, and a bright yellow sun. It was a picture of a family, a happy one. "It is beautiful, baby," I whispered, my throat tight. "For Dad," he said, his voice full of childish importance. He slid off his chair and padded out of the room. "Leo, no," I called, jumping up. "Wait!" I followed him. He was not supposed to leave the wing, but he did not go far. He went straight to the study. He did not knock. He just pushed the heavy door open. I skidded to a halt behind him. The room was full of smoke and anger. Dominic was at his desk. Sal, Anthony, and 4 other men I did not recognize were standing around a map of the city. Cut them off at the ports and Vacchia, Dominic was saying, his voice like gravel. Dad? Everyone froze. The men turned, their hands instinctively moving inside their jackets. Dominic's head snapped up. His face was thunderous, angry at the interruption. Leo, not now. Go to your mother. No, Leo said, his lower lip jutting out. He was not scared of the men. He was not scared of his father's anger. He just walked forward, his small hand clutching the drawing. He marched right up to the desk in front of all these killers and held up the paper. For you, he said. Dominic stared at the drawing. The anger on his face did not just fade, it shattered. He looked at the stick figures holding hands. He looked at the house and the sun. The other men in the room looked away, a mixture of embarrassment and something else. Perhaps. Dominic slowly reached out and took the piece of paper from his son. He held it in his large, scarred hands. He stared at it for a long, long time. I could see his throat work, his jaw tighten. He was not looking at a drawing. He was looking at forever. He was looking at the life Leo had asked for. He carefully, meticulously, folded the drawing, not in a rush. He folded it into a neat square and slid it into the inner breast pocket of his suit jacket, the one directly over his heart. He looked up, first at Leo and then at me, standing in the doorway. His eyes were clear. The conflict was gone. He was no longer a man torn between 2 worlds. He had made a decision. Sal, he said, his voice soft, but with a new, terrifying resolve. Take Leo. Get him some ice cream. Mama and I need to talk. Sal nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. He scooped Leo up. Come on, Piccolo Capo. Let's go bother the kitchen. The door closed, leaving us alone. We cannot leave, he said. It was not a question. No, I whispered. I knew. But we cannot live like this, in a fortress, waiting for the next bullet. So what do you do? He walked to the window, staring out at the stone walls. He's right. He tapped his chest, where the drawing was. He deserves that, the sun, a house, a family that holds hands. How, Dominic? How do we get that? He turned, and his eyes were cold steel. I finish it. They drew first blood. They put a contract on you. They brought this to my son's door. I will not just warn them. I will burn their world down so we can build our own. I did not have time to protest. When he was on the phone, his voice was low, clipped, and speaking a rapid, brutal Italian. I did not need to understand the words. I understood the tone. He was giving orders. He was unleashing his army. Later that night, Sal came to the study. I was there, refusing to leave his side. It is done, boss, Sal said, his voice grim. The 2 Vacchia warehouses on the river, they are gone. The Trovato import business at the docks. It is at the bottom of the harbor. Good, Dominic said. This is a declaration of war, boss, not a warning. It was always a war, Dominic said. They just did not know I was going to fight back. You promised me safety, I finally exploded, the moment Sal left. You promised. This is not safety, this is a war. You just lit the match. You are a monster. I had expected him to yell, to tell me I did not understand. Instead, he just broke. He collapsed into his desk chair, his head in his hands. The sound he made was not a sob. It was a dry, hollow sound of utter despair. A monster, he whispered, his voice muffled. Maybe. Monsters are not born. Natalie, they are made. He looked up at me, and his face was not the face of a boss. It was the face of an 8-year-old boy. Do you know what I remember about my childhood? He asked, his voice raw. I do not remember my mother's face. I remember being cold. My father, he was killed. My mother, she could not take it. She left. For good. He stared at his hands. I was an orphan, but not the kind they put in a home. I was a Morello. I was a liability. My own family. My uncle. He wanted me dead. I lived in alleys. I ate garbage. Giuseppe, the toy maker, he would leave me bread. I was always alone. Always. His eyes met mine, and they were wrecked. I learned one thing. Natalie, if you are alone, you are weak. If you are weak, you die. So I built this. I built this entire world so I would never be cold, or hungry, or weak, or alone ever again. He stood, his body trembling. And then you and this beautiful, perfect boy. You walked right into the middle of it, and you are not things. You are not replaceable. And now Vacchia wants to take you. He wants to make me alone again. He grabbed my arms, his eyes desperate. I do not know how to protect you any other way. I do not know how to be a father. I only know how to fight. I am doing the only thing I know how to do. My anger, my fear. It all dissolved. I saw him, not the monster, the abandoned boy, the man who had built an empire just to fill the hole in his heart. I raised my hands and placed them on his cheeks. "Dominic," I whispered, "look at me. You are not alone, not anymore." That night, the house was quiet, but it was not a peaceful quiet. It was the silence before an earthquake. We put Leo to bed in his crib, which was now permanently in the corner of Dominic's massive bedroom. We were a family, huddled together, waiting for the storm. We lay in his bed, side by side, not touching, just staring at the ceiling, listening to Leo's soft breathing. He is so perfect," Dominic whispered into the darkness. He is all the good parts, none of this. "He is like you," I said softly. "He is strong, he is watchful, he is brave. He walked right into that room full of killers, just to give you a drawing." Dominic turned on his side to face me. "He gets that from you." I looked at him, the man who had confessed his deepest fear, the man who was willing to burn the world for us. I moved first. I rose up, my hair falling around my face, and I moved to straddle his hips. He looked up at me, surprised, his eyes dark in the moonlight. He was so used to being in control. I leaned down and kissed him. It was not the desperate, raw kiss of our argument. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was a promise. "You are not alone," and I whispered again, against his lips. My fingers tangled in his dark hair, my other hand tracing the hard line of his jaw. His hands, those large, dangerous hands, came to rest on my hips, but they did not grip. They did not take. They just held me. He was giving me the control. He was letting me lead. I lowered my body, our eyes locked. In the dim light, I saw the vulnerability he showed no one else. I saw the fear and the love and the terrible weight he carried, and I let him see me, not the waitress, not the victim, but the woman who had chosen to stay, the woman who was choosing him. It was slow, it was quiet. Every movement was a silent conversation. His thumbs stroked my skin. His eyes never left mine. It was not about passion, it was about connection. It was about two broken, terrified people finding an anchor in the storm. It was about sealing the bond that Vacchia and the entire city was trying to break. It was days later. The war had been quiet, too quiet. The attack came just after 2 a.m. It was not a gunshot, it was an explosion. The entire estate shook, as if the foundation itself had been struck. A car alarm wailed, then was abruptly silenced. Dominic was out of bed before the sound had even finished echoing. He was not the vulnerable lover, he was the general. "Go!" he roared, grabbing a gun from the nightstand safe. "Get Leo, the panic room, now!" I did not hesitate. I scooped a screaming Leo from his crib. The alarms in the house were blaring, a deafening synthetic shriek. "Dominic!" I cried. "Go! Natalie, lock the door. Do not open it until you hear Sal's knock. Go!" He was already at the door, pulling on pants, a shadow of coiled, lethal muscle. I ran down the hall, Leo clinging to my neck, sobbing in my ear. I could hear them. Gunfire. Not single shots, automatic weapons. It was a war. The walls were vibrating. I reached the study. I threw back the heavy tapestry, my fingers fumbling with the keypad on the reinforced steel door. It hissed open. I threw myself and Leo inside. Slamming it shut, I heard the thud of the locks engaging. And then, silence. Not true silence. The sound was muffled, distant, the thud of more explosions, the rapid, terrifying rattle of gunfire. Right outside, in the study, shouting, things breaking. Leo was screaming. I held him, my back pressed to the cold steel door, my body shaking so hard my teeth chattered. "It is okay, baby. It is okay. Mama's here," I chanted, but my voice was a lie. I was in a box, a metal box, and I was listening. I was listening to the man I loved fight a battle for our lives. The gunfire was loud, then distant, then loud again. I heard a scream, a long one. Then, for a long, terrible time, nothing. The alarm stopped, the gunfire stopped. Just silence. I did not know how long I waited. An hour, 2. Leo had cried himself to sleep in my arms. My ear was pressed to the door. Tap, 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 tap. Sal's knock, My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hit the button. The door hissed open. The study was destroyed. It was full of smoke that burned my lungs. The desk was splintered. The windows were gone. Dark shapes. Bodies were on the floor. Sal was there. He was bleeding from a gash on his forehead, his suit torn. "Where is he?" I whispered. "Sal, where is he?" Sal's face was a mask of grief. "The kitchen. He is hurt. Natalie, he is hurt bad." My blood ran cold. I ran. I did not care about the bodies, the smoke. I clutched Leo and I ran. The kitchen was a field hospital. Men were on the floor, groaning. Anthony was tying a tourniquet on a guard's arm. And Dominic? He was on the massive kitchen table, the one where Leo had drawn his picture. He was so pale. His shirt was a dark, spreading mass of wet blood. Dr. Rossi, the kind-faced pediatrician, was there, his face grim, pressing a thick wad of gauze against Dominic's side. "Dominic!" I screamed. His eyes flickered open. He saw me. He tried to smile. "Hey, Nat. You idiot!" I sobbed, rushing to his side. I put my hand on his chest, my other hand still clutching Leo. "You were supposed to—" "He is safe," he gasped, his eyes finding Leo. "They did not— Get in the wing." "Doctor." Rossi pushed me back gently. "I need room. Natalie, he is stable. The bullet went through, but he has lost a lot of blood." Hours passed. The estate was secure. The attackers were dead. Vacchia had sent a team, and they had failed. Dominic was alive. "Doctor." Rossi had stitched him, given him blood, and moved him back to his own bed. He was hooked to an IV. He was sleeping. Sal had taken Leo, finally, to clean him up and get him some food. I stood by the bed, just watching him breathe. My hands— I looked down at them. They were covered in blood. His blood. From when I had helped lift him. From when I had touched his face. I looked at him, so pale, so vulnerable. I looked at my hands, and I felt a rage, a cold, pure fury I had never known I possessed. It was not at him. It was at them. At Vacchia. At this entire cursed world that had tried to take him from me. His eyes fluttered. He saw me. He saw the blood on my hands. I leaned down, my face close to his, my voice not a sob, but a low, vicious whisper, a promise. "I won't run again," I said. His eyes held mine. "But if you die," I breathed, my voice shaking with the force of my vow, "if you ever leave me alone with him, I will take Leo, and I will burn this entire world down to the ground. I swear to God, I will burn it all." He managed a faint, pained smile, his hand, so weak, found mine. He squeezed. He knew. I was not the waitress anymore. I was his, and I would finish his war if I had to. Dominic survived. He was a man made of iron and shadows and a simple bullet. Even one that had ripped clean through him was not enough to put him down, but it had been close. Doctor. Rossi stayed at the estate for a week, his kind face a constant, worried presence. I stayed by his bed, changing his bandages, my hands steady now, no longer covered in his blood, but stained with a resolve that matched his. Leo, in the strange, resilient way of children, seemed to understand that Dad was hurt. He would bring his wooden lion, Leon, and set it on Dominic's pillow, as if it were a guardian. Lion keep Dad safe, he would say, his small face serious. In that room, as the king of Chicago's underworld lay helpless, the world shifted. My vow to him, my promise to burn his world down if he left me, had changed something between us. He was not just my protector anymore. We were partners. When he was finally strong enough to sit up, propped against a mountain of pillows, the meetings began. His empire was not dismantled in a day. It was taken apart, piece by meticulous piece, like a complex machine being decommissioned. The war was over. Vacchia was dead. His organization, hit by Dominic's surgical, brutal retaliation and the loss of its leader, had crumbled. The other families, seeing the savage finality of Dominic's move, had fallen silent. They gave him a wide, respectful berth. He had won. He was the undisputed king. And he was abdicating. "You are giving Sal the docs?" Antony said, his voice sharp with disbelief. We were in the study, the first time Dominic had been strong enough to sit at his desk. He looked pale, a dark robe covering the bandages, but his eyes were pure steel. "The docs are his. He has earned them," Dominic said, his voice quiet. "He knows the routes. He knows the men." "And the transport? The unions?" "Yours, Antony. You always had a better head for logistics than I did." "Boss, Domenico," Sal said, stepping forward. He looked lost. "This was not in the plan. You are just leaving? After all this? We won." "I won," Dominic said, his hand moving, almost unconsciously, to the inner pocket of his robe where he had transferred Leo's drawing. "I have what I want. The rest." He looked at the map, at the sprawling network of power he had built from nothing. "The rest is just things. It is a prison, and I am done being a prisoner." He looked at me. I was standing by the window, watching. I was not a prisoner. I was the witness. I was the reason. "What about us?" Antony asked, his voice low. "What about your name?" "My name is Dad now," Dominic said, his voice soft, leaving no room for argument. "Sal, you will be the new head, Antony. You will be his right hand. The other families will respect it. They will respect the strength of a man who can win a war. And then, walk away. It is the strongest move I have left." The men were silent. They were soldiers whose king was leaving the field. "There is one last thing," Dominic said. "I need a fire." Sal looked up, his eyes sharp. "A fire." "A car," Dominic said, his gaze flicking to me. "My car, the black sedan, and I need occupants too, a man and a woman." A cold, grim understanding settled on the room. This was not just an exit, this was an erasure. "It can be done," Sal said, his voice flat. He was a man who dealt in the grim realities. The city morgue, there are always unclaimed. John and Jane does. It will be messy. But fire cleans everything. It has to look like a final, desperate hit. Dominic said, the last of Vacchia's men, getting their revenge. It has to be public. It has to be final. "When?" Antony asked, his throat tight. "1 week, find us a place." "I have already found one," Dominic said. He pulled a file from his desk drawer. "Oregon, a small town on the coast. I bought a house, under an alias. David Miller. Cash. It is done." He had been planning this, not just since the attack, but perhaps since the day he saw Leo's drawing. The last night in Chicago was the hardest. We were leaving at 4 a.m, under the cover of darkness, in a nondescript car Dominic had bought with cash. Sal and Anthony were the only ones who knew. They stood with us in the massive dark entryway of the estate, the fortress, the cage. Leo was asleep in my arms, his face peaceful, unaware his entire life was about to be burned down and reborn. Dominic turned to Sal, his brother, his right hand. He did not offer a handshake. He pulled him into a hard, fierce embrace, slapping his back. "It was an honor, Sal," Dominic whispered, his voice thick. "Boss," Sal whispered back, his eyes wet. "The honor. It was all mine." Dominic turned to Anthony, gripping his shoulder. "Keep him safe. He's the boss now. Take care of my city." Anthony just nodded, his jaw tight. "And you take care of yours." We walked out. We did not look back. We drove away, just the three of us, a small, quiet family, leaving a kingdom behind. At precisely 5:30 in the morning, as the sun was beginning to touch the Chicago skyline, Sal made a phone call. Miles away, on a desolate stretch of road near Vakia's old territory, a black sedan, identical to Dominic's, exploded with a force that rattled windows a mile away. It burned with a terrible, cleansing fire, consuming the two bodies, the metal, the glass, and the entire identity of Dominic Morello. We were in Iowa when the news broke. I saw it on a small television at a gas station while I was buying coffee. Fiery crash. Presumed gangland slaying. Sources identify the victims as notorious mafia boss Dominic Morello and an unidentified female, believed to be Natalie Voss, the woman linked to him in recent tabloid speculation. I stood there, the coffee in my hand, and watched my own death. I watched them pronounce me gone. Dominic was outside, pumping gas, his back to the television. He was wearing jeans and a simple gray Henley. He had a baseball cap pulled down low, but he looked lighter. The weight of his empire, the literal pinstripes and armor he had worn every day, was gone. I got back in the car. He glanced at me. "It is done," I said, my voice quiet. He just nodded. He started the car, and we pulled back onto the highway, heading west. Natalie Voss was dead. Dominic Morello was dead. The woman who was driving, her hand resting on the thigh of the man next to her, was Anna Miller, and she was, for the first time in her life, completely and utterly free. The town was not just a town, it was a pocket of the world that time had forgotten. It was nestled in a curve of the Oregon coast, where a dense, ancient forest of pines and ferns ran right down to the sea. The air did not smell of exhaust and old pennies. It smelled of wet earth, sharp pine, and cold, clean salt. Our house was not a fortress or a penthouse. It was a simple, 2-story house made of dark cedar, tucked into the woods, with a view of the gray, churning ocean. It was quiet. So quiet. The only sounds were the wind in the trees and the distant crash of the waves. We settled. It was a strange, slow process, like learning to breathe a new kind of air. David Miller, my quiet, watchful husband, did not build empires. He did not hold meetings. He bought a small, used fishing boat. He spent his mornings out on the ocean, in the fog, pulling up crab pots. He would come home smelling of salt and fish, his hair wild from the wind, his hands raw and chapped. He was a man at peace, at war with nothing but the tide. Anna Miller, got a job. I walked into the town's small, cluttered bookstore, a place called The Crooked Shelf, and asked if they needed help. The owner, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and gray braids, hired me on the spot. I spent my days surrounded by the smell of old paper and dust, sipping tea, recommending novels to the locals. It was the quietest, most normal thing I had ever done. And Leo started preschool. I cried the first day walking him to the small, colorful building. They were normal tears, not tears of fear or of relief or of terror. They were the simple, bittersweet tears of a mother watching her child grow up. He ran in without even looking back, his new, store-bought backpack, not a gift from a bodyguard, bouncing on his shoulders. We were, in every way that mattered, a normal family. One evening, I came home from the bookstore. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. The air was cold, sharp. I walked around to the back of the house, onto the wooden deck that faced the ocean. And I saw them. Dominic, David, was standing at the railing, looking out at the sky. He was holding Leo in his arms, our son's small, bundled body resting against his chest. He was pointing up, at the first stars beginning to appear. "See that one?" Dominic's voice was low, a soft rumble in the quiet air. "Right there, the 3 in a row, that is the hunter's belt. Orion, he is a giant, chasing a bear through the sky." "A giant," Leo whispered, his voice full of awe, his small, mittened hand pointing. "Wow." Dominic held him up higher, as if to offer him to the sky, to the stars, to the entire, vast, quiet universe. "You can see all of them from here," Dominic said, his voice thick with a new kind of reverence. "In Chicago, you could never see the stars." I stood there, in the shadow of the doorway, my heart so full it ached. I did not move. I did not make a sound. I just watched. The mafia boss who had owned a city, who had commanded armies, was standing on a wooden deck in Oregon, his face turned to the heavens, teaching his son the constellations. This was it. This was the drawing, the house, the family, the sun, and the stars. This was the peace we had bought with fire and blood. Later that night, after Leo was fast asleep, his wooden lion resting next to his plush one on the nightstand, I found Dominic in the kitchen. The house was dark. He had lit 2 candles on the small, worn wooden table. A bottle of red wine was open. A radio in the corner was playing some old, scratchy jazz. He was just sitting, staring into the flame. He looked up as I entered, and his eyes, in the soft light, were not the eyes of a general or a king. They were just the eyes of my husband. He held out a hand. I took it, and he pulled me onto his lap, his arms wrapping around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. We sat in silence, just listening to the music, swaying gently. "I like this," I whispered, my lips brushing his ear. "The quiet, us. It is new," he murmured, his arms tightening around me. "Worrying about the tide instead of them. It is a good new." I pulled back, just enough to look at him. I traced the line of his jaw, the harsh features that had been so softened by the sea air. The scar was still there, the memory of his old life. "You are new," I said softly. He looked at me, his gaze intense, questioning. "I spent so long," I whispered, my voice catching, "running from the man you were, the man in the glass apartment, the man who owned me. I was so afraid of him." I touched his face, my fingers trembling slightly. "You are not who I feared anymore," I said, my voice clear. "You are who I chose." His breath hitched. He did not speak, his eyes full of a love so deep and quiet it shook me, said everything. He leaned in and kissed me. It was not the desperate, raw kiss of our arguments. It was not the passionate, claiming kiss of our survival. It was slow. It was tender. It was a kiss of arrival. It tasted of wine and salt and home. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me impositive close, and we swayed there, in the small, candlelit kitchen. 2 ghosts who had finally found a place to rest. Nearby, on the counter, Leo's wooden lion sat, a silent guardian of our new, fragile peace. The peace lasted 6 months. It was a Saturday, a perfect, gray, misty Oregon morning. Leo was at a friend's house for a birthday party. Dominic was out on the boat. Checking his pots, I was reading in the living room, a cup of tea steaming next to me, the house silent. The doorbell rang. I smiled. It was probably Mrs. Gable from the bookstore, dropping off a book. I padded to the door. my heart light. I opened it. No one. The wooden porch was empty. The misty rain was drifting in, making the wood dark and damp. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing, just the sound of the wind. I was about to close the door when I saw it. On the welcome mat, a simple, white, business-sized envelope. It had no name, no stamp. It had been placed there. My blood did not just run cold, it evaporated. I was back in Chicago. I was back in the hallway. The smell of pine and salt was gone, replaced by the phantom stench of gunpowder. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely pick it up. I tore it open. Inside, a single piece of white paper, folded once. Just a few typed words. "We know you are alive. You'll never be free." I did not scream. I did not move. I just stopped. The blood roared in my ears. I did not hear him come in. The door was still open. He just appeared. He was in his rain gear, his hair wet, his face flushed from the cold. He saw my face and the smile died on his. "Nat? Anna? What is it? You look like you have seen a ghost." I held out the letter. My hand was a dead weight. He took it. He read it. I watched his face. The transformation was immediate. It was terrifying. The fisherman, David, vanished. The man who taught his son about the stars. The man who kissed me by candlelight. He was gone. In his place was Dominic Morello. His eyes did not just darken. They went flat, cold. They became the eyes of the man who had ordered cities to burn. The general was back. He looked at the letter. He looked at the misty woods beyond our porch. He looked at me. He did not curse. He did not yell. His voice was a low, deadly quiet. "Then I guess we stop running." He took my hand. His was hard, calloused from the ropes and steady as stone. Together, we stepped out onto the porch. We were not David and Anna. We were not victims. We were Dominic and Natalie. And we were ready. Thank you so much for listening to our story. It means the world to us. We would love to know where you are listening from. So please, drop a comment and let us know what part of the world you are in. If you love this story and want to hear more like it, be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories. And finally, share your thoughts. What did you think of Natalie and Dominic's journey? We cannot wait to read what you have to say.